It's the warmest of welcomes back to Matchbook's NFL podcast, joined by three winners, our triple entente of Drew Dinsick. How are you, sir? Fresh from a weekend in Vegas. Doesn't he look fresh after it?
Fresh.
Rob Pizzola, very fresh. Bet Stamps, Rob Pizzola and Fabian Sommer as well. Guys, some good winners last week. Of course, we only kind of locked in 5 total plays, but your 3 best bets. Let's bring them up on the screen and have a look, and let's do a very quick recap of them. Rob Pizzola, you got the best of the number here, buddy. The Jets plus 5.5. For anyone who didn't see that game, it was a bit of a Zach Wilson backdoor cover. Missed the 2-point conversion, but stay within the 5. That got us up. Kudos to you, Rob. Drew, you got the best of the number here as well. The Browns plus 6.5. There was not too much 6.5 come the weekend, let me tell you. But anyone who got the 5 and the 4.5 as well, of course, covered. And Sumi, your number stayed pretty solid. The Chiefs and the Browns over 54.5 at 1.92. Great weekend. Let's take a bit of a recap, very quick recap. Drew Dinsick, what's your main takeaway from week 1?
Well, I kind of had a sneaking suspicion just looking across the board at how many games were lined in at or around a field goal that it was going to feel like a week where there was some uncertainty and some league, and I guess really I think looking at how solid the quarterback play is and in general the coaching is across the league, I think we're in for a season where kind of league-wide parity is sort of a narrative that takes hold here. And you're going to have these sort of dog weeks a lot, would be my gut reaction. As far as I'm not overreacting to any of the positive performances we saw, really. I think everything was relatively expected as I look back at my numbers and make a couple adjustments. But I have downgraded the Falcons significantly. Not only was that I thought that was a fair result that they got blown out, considering having watched a lot of that game. And Art Smith, everything that I had kind of hoped in the back of my head we would see out of his offense, but the Falcons did not manifest. And so there are now red flags all around that team. I have a big edge on them against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the current number, and there's no way I'm touching this week. So kind of disappointing.
Yeah, he took over 48, of course, in that game. The Eagles kept up their side of the bargain, as we suspected they might do. The Falcons very much didn't. Suma, Drew touched on it there about overreacting. It's always commonplace after week 1 to see a team. And look, we have the Packers, but the Packers always struck me as a team that do this once a year anyway at Tampa Bay last year. But you think that the Bills, there might be a bit of an overreaction to that loss at home to the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, the Bills offense had a very uncharacteristic game, but I think it was a mix of Pittsburgh defense playing arguably the best potential game they could ever play. Just by watching the game, I thought that their secondary had a once-in-a-lifetime performance. They were always close to those receivers, and their front four got pressure all the time. So I wouldn't really put too much weight on that performance. We also had like 16 miles per hour of wind, maybe a little bit more on the field. So that was a performance that was very frustrating to watch, but I think it doesn't really change my outlook on the Bills offense for the season.
Rob Pizzola, what was your main takeaway from the opening weekend?
Yeah, I think definitely we don't want to overreact. I think back to 2019, week 1, where the Bengals went into Seattle and almost beat the Seahawks. And then week 2, they ended up being a pick'em against the 49ers and got absolutely smoked. And by season's end, that line should have been 2 touchdowns. So I think week 1 presents some trickiness in the sense that it's only one game and you don't know if a team played to the top or bottom end of their range or if that's just what we can expect. I think from a league perspective, offensive holding is back. That's one thing that I definitely noticed this week, because last year we noticed a huge rise in scoring because offensive holding wasn't being called. And then this week we noticed a lot of laundry on the field because those holds are back. It's not to the same level as it was pre-COVID, but certainly it's something that needs to be accounted for when looking at these totals again.
All right, good stuff. That's week 1 in the books. On to week 2. Before we get into this weekend's games, we flagged it last week. We have a very exclusive offer just for the Matchbook NFL podcast listeners. It's almost like you guys are getting favoritism over everyone else, but hey, that is what it is. I don't make the rules. If you are signing up on matchbook.com today, you can get a bet 20, get 20 offer by using the bonus code NFL20 when you are signing up. That's for 18s plus only, new customers only, and please do gamble responsibly. If you're looking for further terms and conditions on that offer, the URL that you need to head to is matchbook.com /promo/NFL20 to check out the terms and conditions and the promos of that. And also, we rattled through a lot of these games. The guys have big bets towards the end that we don't necessarily cover in the main slate. You can check out the full recap of this at insights.matchbook.com, 2 or 3 hours post-recording each Wednesday afternoon. All right, Chiefs, Ravens, first game we have to talk about. It's probably the marquee fixture of week 2. The current betting as we have it at matchbook.com. You can back the Chiefs in the money line at 1.56, the Ravens at 2.68. The main handicap line currently is the Ravens getting 4. It's been a while since the Ravens are getting 4 at home, gentlemen. I would suggest at 1.9 and 55. Not that surprising for 2 pretty prolific offenses, 55. Drew Dinsick, I know this probably isn't a game that we're kind of looking at maybe in terms of bet in pre-match, but there could be a couple of angles in play with this because we saw it again. Your strategy along with Mr. Malter on the deep dive. Chiefs go behind. What do you guys back? You back the Chiefs plus or you back the over? Could be a similar kind of situation here.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And we had talked about it, I think, right off air last week with our group here. And I had machinations of getting the Chiefs at a pick 'em, some kind of a deflated price because I had hoped that the Browns could put away that upset. And that was not to be, combined with the Ravens just underperforming in primetime. So the market has made a pretty vicious adjustment here away from the Ravens. We had expected to see a line that was under 3. This is now over 3. If you were talking about a win probability adjustment there, we're in like the 8 to 10% range. That's a lot to swallow. And there are some very clear and obvious issues with the Kansas City defense, notably, their inability to tackle in the running game against the Browns that could manifest an edge here for the Ravens. So at this point, at a price of 4, this is Ravens or nothing pre-flop. Realistically, if Tyrann Mathieu is healthy and in the game for the Chiefs, that solves one of those problems, and that probably makes the line a little closer to fair. But as I look at the number now, this is Ravens or nothing. And considering the Ravens had massive issues with kind of cohesion across the offensive line against the Raiders front that I don't have a ton of respect for, I think I'd have to sit out and pass at this point. Similarly, Ravens defense obviously missing Marcus Peters and Jimmy Smith substantially. The replacement level corners that they had out there and some of the safety play was very underwhelming against the Raiders team. And if you can't defend Darren Waller, I can already tell you can't defend Travis Kelce. So there are enough red flags here about how the Ravens match up against the Chiefs. And this is a known. I was salivating to bet Chiefs because I know the matchup advantages are all tick in favor of the Chiefs here. So in general, I think the Chiefs ultimately win this game. I don't think it's a comfortable win because the Ravens likely have some tricks up their sleeve. This is a smart team. It's a good coach. I don't think that they were coached especially well in game 1, but the idea that Harbaugh is going to have 2 stinkers in a row, I think is a tough sell. So, I think ultimately my best hope is that the Ravens come out, give their best shot, take a lead into halftime potentially, and then we get to fire away on Chiefs in comeback mode, which is my favorite bet in all of live sports.
Ever. Suma, pick up on something Drew touched on there in regards to game plan for the Ravens on Monday night. You thought it was pretty vanilla, that they were holding something back. I don't know full stop if that is the case, but you thought even just looking at it that there's definitely a lot more in this offense.
Yeah, I just had the impression that this was not the Ravens offense that we used to know. I think Lamar Jackson had like 2 designed runs, and he could usually end up with 8 to 12 per game.
Yep.
So the option game with Lamar as a runner was basically non-existent in that game. That was very surprising to me. Maybe they thought that they don't have the right running backs at their disposal. Latavius Murray missed some holes or some cutbacks during the game where he just went straight into a brick wall and just didn't use the cutback lane. And I really didn't know what to think of that performance because they basically just let Lamar Jackson drop back against an edge rush that was crazy that day. I think their 2 edge rushers, Yannick Ngakoue and Max Crosby, they combined for like 24 pressures that game, something like that, which was completely crazy. And I didn't really have the impression that the Ravens knew what they were doing offensively, and that could be an issue against the Chiefs when you have to go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes. In general, I think what we saw from the Browns, some of these gap scheme runs, pin pull runs, that's usually something that the Ravens are pretty good at. So in the run game, the Ravens should have an advantage, but it's really tough to see what their identity is after last week. Maybe they held some stuff back. We don't really know. But what concerns me a little bit more is their defense, or let's say the current state of their defense, because they usually have a top 3 blitzing rate with great man coverage, or let's say some risky coverage behind that. But now you have Marcus Peters on IR. Jimmy Smith is still banged up. He might end up playing this week, but no one knows whether he will be 100%. And we saw against the Raiders, who don't have a good offensive line, that the Raiders couldn't get any pass rush when they rushed only 4 guys. And whether they rush 4 guys against the Chiefs O-line, or they play heavy blitzes against Patrick Mahomes, it will probably not work out properly. So at that number, I don't have a strong opinion, but I couldn't bet the Ravens at this point, to be honest.
Rob Pizzola, I'm kind of suspecting that you're of the same opinion here, that the market isn't kind of giving an edge either ways, but have you any kind of general feeling for how this potentially will play out?
Yeah, I think I share a lot of the same thoughts as Drew and Suma here. I mean, obviously the Chiefs were a 1-point favorite on this look-ahead line, and that's been massively adjusted based off of 1 week's worth of games, in which the Chiefs really didn't play all that well either. So this is pretty much all about how we value Baltimore. And if I'm using my preseason ratings or what I thought these teams would be going into the year, absolutely I'd jump all over Baltimore +4. But I just can't get that game out of my head. And maybe that's a mistake as a bettor in general, but there's a lot of advantages they should have had against the Raiders, which did not manifest into advantages for them. You look at Oakland coming into the year, I should say Las Vegas now coming into the year, and they're weak on the offensive line just in general. You would think that the Ravens would be able to get pressure in the backfield, but they really did not disrupt Carr, especially during that second half without blitzing, like Suma said. And the problem is if you need to blitz in order to generate any pressure against the opposing quarterback, well, that's a problem because their cornerback depth is being challenged right now with Marcus Peters and potentially Jimmy Smith out. And then Marlon Humphrey actually got hurt mid-game, ended up finishing the game banged up as well. And that's just a recipe for disaster against the Chiefs, especially since we know that they're going to have a great matchup with Travis Kelce as well. So it's just difficult for me to get on board with the Ravens here. I think if this was years past, I mean, I'd almost certainly grab this number right away. And I still think it's the right way to play the game. But I just think there's so much uncertainty that it ends up being a pass for me.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those games to be watching. And of course, we might have formed a different opinion come Monday. Or sorry, it's Sunday or Monday night game. This one, not totally sure, but it's a primetime game. Anyway, next game we want to look at, I don't think there's a selection there for us, but I think there's going to be plenty more throughout the show. But it's definitely a game that we couldn't not talk about anyway. But there is one here that I think there is a definite alignment here, especially on the side with the Dallas Cowboys at the Chargers. Good game ahead, I would suggest. This could be a lot of fun in LA on Sunday evening. Dallas, you can back on the money line currently at 2.44. The Chargers are 1.66. And the main handicap, as we have it currently at matchbook.com, is Dallas +3. This is fluctuating a lot since the market opened, but they're +3 at 1.93. And the total is 55.5. Drew, I'll get you in a while. You play that number a lot better than 55.5. But Rob Pizzola, make the case. I think you like the Chargers in this one.
I do. Now, there's one thing that's going to concern me right away here, and I'll just get this out of the way. This is probably going to be a home game for the Dallas Cowboys, or it's going to feel like a home game with the amount of fans. And honestly, I feel bad for the Chargers because they finally get a game with fans, and it's going to feel like a visiting game for them. So I think that definitely has to be taken into account here. But from an X's and O's perspective, I'm really struggling to see how the Cowboys defense is going to generate stops in this game. And part of that is because the Chargers offensive line is so drastically improved. Corey Linsley coming over from Green Bay. They drafted Slater in the first round as well. That's a really great offensive line now, which was an area of weakness for them in years past, able to shut down that Washington defensive line last week. So I just don't see how the Cowboys are able to get home on Justin Herbert. And I also think that the Chargers wide receivers just match up really well with these Cowboys cornerbacks. I just don't think that the Cowboys have the defensive personnel to cover the weapons that the Chargers can bring to them here. So for that reason, I think it's Chargers or nothing. Now, obviously, the Cowboys offense looked good against the Bucs on that opening night. But if you actually break it down, Dak was throwing a lot underneath, audibling into a lot of short throws to kind of mitigate that Bucs pass rush. His average depth of target was one of the lowest in the entire league in the first week of the season. And I think teams eventually pick up on that. I think the Bucs didn't necessarily do that in game, but I think the Chargers in this game force the Cowboys to throw it a little bit deeper down the field. And I just don't know that the Cowboys offensive line holds up, especially with La'el Collins suspended now and Joey Bosa being on that side. I think that's kind of a recipe for disaster for Dallas. And the last thing I'll say is I think the score lines for both of these teams were very misleading in week one. I think the Chargers really should have beat the Washington football team by a lot more than they did. They bogged down in the red zone. I think there was actually a span where they had 4 trips into the red zone in that game and only scored 6 points. One of them was just like a bogus fumble that got upheld by review. Just a lot of things working against them. And the Cowboys obviously forced the 4 turnovers, still end up losing the game. So I think the score is kind of flattering for them as well. So 3 looks like a slightly cheap price to me. Again, I wouldn't go nuts on this type of game because I don't think there's a ton of value, but I do like the matchup for LA.
Yep, 3's not a bad price. Again, you're going to have to pay a small if you want to get 2.5 and stay under that key number. Drew, talk to me about that total. So you got it, I think it was a 52 or 52.5. A lot of steam came after that up to 55.5, but it's hard to expect or to predict that defenses will have a big one here.
It is, and I agree with Rob's sentiment on the side here. My fare was Dallas +2, but there are enough red flags to steer clear. And I guess something to watch in particular, and I guess the one thing where I'm not still running to the book to slam this 55, and although it is funny, there's been like a weird market push pull at 55.5, like that's some kind of key number. I really don't know. I don't see or get that at all. If this if this is a 35-20 game, I guess I'll take it all back. but the fact that there is any kind of interest in the 55 as a key is interesting, I guess. But ultimately, this open 52, it was an easy play to the over on Sunday. In general, what we've seen when you catch a high opener that you think is not high enough, they tend to move like 2-3 points at a time as opposed to just 1 or 2, because just the nature of scoring when you're talking about a game like this. And so in general, you need to hit these early as possible. I think by the time we woke up Monday morning here on the West Coast, it was already up to 55. So this is, and I think honestly, I think as long as the Cowboys stay healthy, then, this is the nature of the totals that we should be talking about for all their games, because this is a team that can defend the run well. So they're going to get lots of opportunities on offense. And if they can if they can make this prolific passing offense work, then they're going to score touchdowns in bulk. And I was delighted by what we saw out of Dak Prescott in week 1. I thought in every way, shape, and form he shook off the rust in the first half and was very clean and very but maybe his accuracy wasn't quite what you would have hoped over the balance of the game, but his decision making was superlative. And a lot of the quotes that we heard after, and a lot of the kind of mainstream reaction after of, well, they should have gotten Zeke Elliott more involved. And he checked out a 28. They had 28 designed run plays against that Tampa Bay defensive front. It's like, there are some problems that exist kind of in this orbit that is going to prevent them from kind of reaching their true potential this season. And I will watch these games very, very carefully to see if the influence of, no, we need to do it the wrong way, if that ends up seeping into the game plan and cementing some of the, the offensive vision, then all of a sudden this becomes an under team for me, because, realistically, if they're not a high flying pass first, aggressive offense, then they're in deep trouble, because the defense is full of holes in the secondary, and anyone they go up against who can even remotely pass protect is going to put up decent point score on them. So the fact that the Chargers can pass pro, the fact that the Chargers have weapons in the passing game, the fact that Herbert looks like he is continuing his progression, that puts the Chargers into the 30-35 point range for me projection wise. And so I still think I feel pretty good about getting this over 52, now at 55.5. I think that's still fair to get that over, even if the Cowboys do something silly in terms of game planning.
Suma, Chargers -3. If you're going to play a side, is that the side for you?
Yeah, I would definitely rather lean towards the Chargers than the Cowboys. I understand that many power ratings maybe won't get to +3 in this spot, but if you account for like Collins being back, Dak Prescott's arm not being 100%, I guess, this week, he really struggled with the deep ball in Tampa Bay. Michael Gallup is not playing. He would be a very solid receiver for the outside. I think Dallas has some depth there at the wide receiver position, but I don't think that Cedric Wilson is necessarily a guy that consistently wins on the outside. So I would still describe Michael Gallup as a small loss for them. And on the other side, I just want to mention that I think Rob mentioned it already, but Chargers Washington was to me the most misleading score in Week 1. The Chargers had 9 drives against what was supposed to be a top 5 defense with arguably the best defensive line in football, and they had 6 red zone drives. So basically, 6 out of their 9 drives were into the end zone, and they only punted once. And before the season started, I thought there's a lot of uncertainty about what Vince Lombardi would bring to that offense. And I thought that the Saints offense was on full display. There were so many smart and easy layups for Justin Herbert. I thought that he put guys like Jared Cook and Keenan Allen consistently in the best positions to succeed. They had a very decent early down pass rate. So I really saw all the stuff that I wanted to see from the Chargers. And I thought that Justin Herbert probably had the best game from a quarterback when you consider the context of the situation. So it was really great to watch. All the things that I want to see, I got to see. And I think Rashawn Slater might just be an all-pro in his first season. I mean, he was stonewalling Chase Young all the time. Pretty impressive to watch. And yeah, I think before Week 1, I would have said that the Cowboys are a solid look at +3. But now after Week 1, after I got more information on the Chargers, we know that Larry Collins is out, Michael Gallup is out, Prescott's arm might not be ready. They might call lots of stupid runs because what Drew said, they wanted to call 28 runs, and Prescott audibled out of 12 of them. But the problem is that Todd Bowles likes to show more man in the box. So you get a lot of looks where I don't want to run the ball against. And on the other side, Brandon Staley is one that has the lowest box weight in the entire league last year, where he usually only has like 6 defenders in the box, and he wants to contain the run and stop it with his 2 safeties. And this might lead the Cowboys to call a lot more runs this week. And that way, I don't think it's the right way to go into a shootout with Justin Herbert.
Yeah. Justin Herbert, indeed, and Drew Dinsick. We're still probably sore about the fact that we lost out in those prop bets that Tua got drafted ahead of him. But we still, every time you see him, you're like, how did that happen? You wanted to jump back in, Drew.
Yeah, 2 comments. Suma's breakdown makes me think that Chargers first half is the look if you want a side action in this one, just because of the way that you may get a little bit of a flat game plan out of the Cowboys. And then, Cowboys also second week in a row on the road. They get a little extra rest, so maybe that's mitigated. But I can't get to 3 unless I use some pretty aggressive home field advantage. And as Rob mentioned, this is probably a road game for the Chargers. The other point I wanted to bring up, I agree that the Chargers Washington football game was misleading. The Dallas Tampa score was misleading, but the number one for me in terms of incorrect interpretation of the box score was Pats Dolphins. 17-16 final score there was absolutely bananas. Yeah. There's no way that they play that game 100 times and you get more than 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah, 100%. I think in terms of selection here, let's take the Chargers -3 at 2.04. Again, we're not going to turn anybody off the over there. Good luck if you're back in the under, but that just, for me, that seems to be the strongest case there at 2.04. Right, let's move on. This is probably, for me, probably definitely top 3 of the best games this weekend. The 49ers and Eagles in Philly. The early game is Sunday evening. You can back the 49ers here on the money line at 1.58. The Eagles at 2.64. The main handicap line, the Eagles getting a 3.5 point start. Pretty key number in the NFL, of course, at 1.87. And the total is 50, and it is rising. It did open a bit shorter than that. And Suma, you like the over here in this one. It's 50. Would you happy enough to play it at 50?
I think Drew got the best number.
He always
earlier
gets the
in the
best number
week.
of these totals. Always gets them.
He always gets the best number. I would say that there's still value towards the over rather than the under, because I would struggle to make a case for the under here, to be honest, because I think I talked to Drew about this before the season, but the Eagles offense had like the widest range of outcomes, where we could say that they could be third worst in the league, or they could have a top 10 offense, depending on the development of Jalen Hurts and the combination of a great offensive line, decent young wide receivers, maybe Nick Sirianni calls a good
Yeah.
offense. And I think we have to adjust for the Falcons defense, which could arguably be one of the worst in the league. And they didn't really face much resistance in week 1. But I really like what I saw from them play calling wise. They took a lot of easy layups. They considered Jalen Hurts in the run game, and the combination of Jalen Hurts being a runner, that good offensive line, and Miles Zenner running through some open holes, I think that offense could have a very high floor throughout the season. And I also really like what I saw from Jalen Hurts. I also think that PFF graded him with a very high passing rate that game. So if Jalen Hurts really took that step forward to being a much better passer, that offense could be very dangerous, because as soon as you have a quarterback who can run and throw the ball, there are not a lot of receipts that you can use as a defense to defend that. And the Niners, sadly enough, will be without Jason Barrett for the remainder of the season. Poor guy. I think it's the third big injury for him in his career. And right now, they don't have any cornerbacks left. It's a very, very thin cornerback chart. And I don't think it will be enough to have a clean game against the Eagles offense. And on the other side, the Falcons had a very bad offensive line, and they completely got crushed in the trenches last week. But it will be different for the 49ers. They have a much better offensive line. They have a much better play caller. They have more weapons. And the biggest weakness of the Eagles is their linebacking corps. And as soon as Kyle Shanahan sees a bad linebacking corps, he is going to throw everything at them, and he will make it very hard for them to defend anything in space. They have enough playmakers. I don't really like the Eagles secondary, so I think that the 49ers should be able to put up some scores there. And like I said, on the other side, I don't think that the 49ers pass rush will be enough against the very good offensive line to contain the Eagles to very few points. So my only look on that game would be towards the over. I think the opener on the spread was San Francisco -3. I think at that number, I would have liked the 49ers a little bit, but I also made a small adjustment for the Eagles after week 1, just because I like what I saw from Jalen Hurts and their play calling.
Yeah, Rob Pizzola, both offenses to move the ball here and clip the over.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'm not in love with it. I think some of the value's been sucked out of the market, but certainly I agree with Suma. It's very difficult to make a case for the under. Obviously, the defensive injuries are mounting for the 49ers. I think one that wasn't talked about was Javon Kinlaw was missing from the defensive line last week, and the Lions were actually able to run the ball all over the 49ers, which is not something that I would have expected. And I think with the Eagles' offensive line being rejuvenated and fully healthy for the first time in a long time, I think there's the opportunity for them to win a little bit at the line of scrimmage as well here. So I do like the matchups for the Eagles. And it's desperation mode when you're signing Dre Kirkpatrick, because that guy is completely washed as a corner. So if he gets any time on the field against, the likes of Devontae Smith, Jalen Reagor, I think it's a matchup nightmare for the 49ers with their lack of cornerbacks there. But on the other side of things, I think we can rely on San Francisco to score points this year. And I know a lot of people rag on Jimmy Garoppolo in general, and I don't think Garoppolo is an above average quarterback, but I think he suits that system really well. And Kyle Shanahan's able to get the most out of him. And we consistently see it. You look at Garoppolo's numbers in San Fran, he's been top 5 in EPA per play as a quarterback relative to guy like in the same conversation as guys like Mahomes and Rodgers and things of that nature. And it's because there's such a great game plan every week. And I agree with Suma. I think the linebacking core is a major issue for the Eagles here that the 49ers are really going to exploit in this game. So I do see points. Again, I'm a little bit concerned about these high totals this year after what we saw in week 1 with the penalties on offense rising a bit, but 50 to me is a bit low. So yeah, I'm in agreement there on the over.
Yeah, Very much on the same page with you, Rob. I guess little sidebar. Why are we emphasizing offensive holding and some of these offensive penalties again? I thought that the pivot that they made away from that in the beginning of last year was actually the correct decision, at least from creating entertaining football.
I would agree. I mean, and the funny thing is, like, going back to Thursday with Dallas and Tampa Bay, thinking back on that game now, those offensive lines must have played a really clean game and did a really good job, because I thought we were going to get the same scoring environment this year just because of the lack of holdings in that specific game. And then Sunday came, and I think by half an hour into the early games, I was like, oh no, here we go again type of thing.
Yeah, there were a couple of players, a couple of units that especially got hit hard by that. But yeah, I guess just to go back to some reaction on this, or at least some setup for this Eagles-Niners game. The Eagles, they were impressive offensively. We were cautiously optimistic that this could be a good offense, and a ton of it is because Jalen Hurts can convert third and short a lot of ways, and that's keeping our offense matriculating the ball down the field is a great way to kind of succeed in today's NFL. So the promise for them to go score for score with the Niners is there for sure, especially against the Niners team that's limited at the quarterback position. But I guess we don't want to overreact to the fact that the Falcons were, they rolled out the very innovative new bend and then break defense, which I thought was a surprise. Did not expect to see them come out with that approach, but so be it. The Niners and Jimmy Garoppolo, they're doing this now the third straight year, where they have an early season East Coast road trip where they get back-to-back games on the East Coast, and they stay on the East Coast during that 2-week stretch to get sort of an extended preseason is sort of the way I like to think about this. And that has borne fruit now 2 years in a row. 2 years ago, it bore fruit to the degree of one of the most aggressive beatdowns we've seen at the hands of the Cincinnati Bengals. And then last year, they went into that week 3 game against the Giants, having just absorbed more injuries than I think we had ever seen any team absorb through 2 weeks. And they used the time at the Greenbrier to really, kind of get their replacement level players up to speed, and played great against the Giants. So, the idea that you're going to get anything other than sort of a 84th, we'll say 84th percentile or better performance out of the Niners, I think is high in this game. Even without accounting for that, my fair price says the right side in this one is the 49ers. I will recognize that I've been higher than the market on the Niners for the entirety of the preseason, including last week. So I think there's I'm biased to a degree. But yeah, over 48.5 was the right number to fire on the opener here. It's up to 50. There's been a little bit of buyback. It's come down from 50.5. I saw it at 50.5 at some places. So the market seems to think this is the right number. However, as long as we're under 51, which I kind of consider sort of a new NFL key, I'm happy taking it over.
Yeah.
I've made the assumption too, Drew Dinsick, that I'm going to start staying up later on Sunday nights to get the best of these numbers. Every one of these totals, I'm missing by 2 or 3 points.
Honestly, if we're halfway through the season and I'm only playing totals on Sunday, I won't be surprised. A couple of places that I'm getting action down. You used to only be able to get like a relatively small play on the openers on totals. But they're taking about 4 or 5 times as much across the market now on opening totals. So I think I'm probably in the place now where I'll just fire on the openers and totals and then look for sides as we go through the week.
Hey, Drew, it's almost like they have competition from regulated markets. It's almost.
It's a beautiful thing, Sully.
It's a beautiful thing. The open regulated market. Love to see it. All right, guys, over 50, I think is the play there. 1.9 49ers and Eagles. Again, should be a good one. Last game in the main slate we're going to cover is the Raiders at the Steelers. Drew, you were very bullish on the Steelers last week. You kind of swung against the tide there. I like that a bit. So I'll start with you here first for this one and see if there's more love for Pittsburgh here. You can back the Raiders 3.2 on the money line. Pittsburgh Steelers at 1.43. The Raiders getting a 5.5 point start at 1.98, and 47 is the total. That defense looked very good last week. Again, Suma touched on already. Maybe it was a small bit overrated because the way some people are talking, they're talking kind of like they're as good as the 85 Bears. So let's not overreact to that. But what do you think here? Is Pittsburgh the right side laying 5.5, Drew?
I don't think we'll ever see a defense that's as good as the 85
Probably
Bears,
not.
but that's
No.
okay. The also the Pittsburgh, they benefit. As long as we're commenting on holding, they benefited significantly from some offensive holding called against the Bills in that game. That game could have got away from them in the first half when the Steelers' offense was really, really looking quite out of sorts. It took until kind of a couple key halftime adjustments, I think, for them to sort of figure out, okay, yeah. No. Now we understand where our weaknesses are, where we should attack the soft spots in this Buffalo defense. And I thought their second half performance was very, very impressive offensively relative to the first half. But you're right. Their defense was great overall, and is a unit that actually caught the Bills by surprise because they didn't blitz much. In fact, they got sustained pressure with their front four, and it was interesting that the mobility of Josh Allen was still a problem for that defense, even though they had lots of linebackers and safeties kind of ready to try to match, and kind of key on that. So in general, against a mobile quarterback, I think the Steelers are still a little bit vulnerable in terms of being able to be scored on. And honestly, I'm not sure why the Bills didn't go with their adjustment that they did exactly a year ago, or not exactly a year ago, but last December. It was a lot of the same kind of stuck in first gear for that offense against the Steelers in the first half. And then they adjusted in the second half to just target Diggs with reckless abandon, and it worked so spectacularly. I didn't exactly understand why they didn't go right back to the well on that. I think it would have made that a tougher sweat on Steelers +7, but that's okay. And now they welcome the Raiders into Heinz Field. Raiders off of obviously an enormously emotional win at home in their grand home opener, effectively. This Raiders team has two problems that I do not see how they get over when it comes to generating offense. The first is the Raiders offense runs through Darren Waller. The Steelers have personnel to be able to match with Darren Waller. There's not many teams in the NFL that you can say that about, but I think Minkah Fitzpatrick provides kind of the key defensive piece to at least disrupt Carr and Waller's, kind of one-on-one chemistry that they have going, which means that this becomes a game where, Derek Carr is going to have to get it done targeting his running backs and wide receivers, and I think that's going to be a problem. The second thing that I'll point out is the Raiders lost another starter on the offensive line. This is now basically an entirely new unit around Richie Incognito. And I was not especially impressed by the play of Leatherwood, particularly in pass pro. And he goes head to head against TJ Watt. So best of luck to him. I think Derek Carr is going to be under pressure pretty consistently in this one, even with just the 4-man front. And I would expect that you can get the worst out of Carr, putting him under pressure on the road in a loud environment. This is one that I think you're going to pretty clearly see the limitations of the Raiders offense as currently constituted. And the market's still low on the Steelers. The look ahead here was 5.5. I thought that was a little bit disrespectful, and then it's come down to 4.5. So I went to town yesterday on Steelers -4.5. My fair price here, just for the record, is Pittsburgh by 7. So this is a touchdown win for me for the Steelers, and I don't mind laying the points.
Rob, you lean Steelers here as well?
I do. Not as high as 7 like Drew is. I think part of the reason why is just because I have zero faith in the Steelers offense this season, especially behind that offensive line. And I think that there's, Max Crosby, Yannick Ngakoue on the outside for the Raiders could potentially be a big problem for Big Ben in this game. But conversely, on the other side, I do see the Steelers defense being all over Derek Carr in this game. And, I look at how the Raiders offensive line held up against the Ravens. They were middle of the pack last week in terms of adjusted sack rate and pressures. But the Baltimore defense in that front seven doesn't even come close to the pass rush of what Pittsburgh can offer, especially with TJ Watt and Melvin Ingram. So from that perspective, I just am struggling to see the Raiders scoring points in this game. And almost all my analysis on this podcast all year is going to be about the X's and O's of a football game. You'll very rarely hear me talk about situational spots in general, but I do think that this is one of the worst ones we're going to get all season long that maybe is not being factored enough into this line. And that's, the short rest, hard-fought win on Monday Night Football, having to travel from West Coast to East Coast. And the reason I bring that up, it's not really a thing in the NFL anymore. In fact, I think the market is over-adjusted to that travel from West Coast to East Coast, but it's a thing for John Gruden, because if you look at the Raiders specifically under Gruden, They faced this situation 11 times in the last 3 years. They're 3-8 against the spread in those games where they've traveled from West Coast to East Coast. The rest of the league in that same time period is 23-5 against the spread, traveling West Coast to East Coast. So for some reason or another, this Raiders coaching staff or their travel crew has not seemed to be able to figure out this specific spot like the rest of the league has. And I think that kind of plays a factor here, the whole situation. So I agree with Drew. I think the Steelers number is a little bit short. I'm surprised it was adjusted down after last week's games. And I think this is a defensive matchup that they should dominate.
Yeah, Suma, I'm not sure if you kind of like anything on the side, but I think you possibly like the under, but it's such a key number at 47. But I must admit, watching a bit of that game the last night with the Steelers, sometimes you watch a team and you're thinking, oh, geez, I'm going to back these guys, start backing these guys with unders because they have a good defense and they don't have much explosion on the offense. So even at 47, would you play that at the moment, 1.97 under?
I would not play anything right now because I think Yannick Ngakoue is dealing with a hamstring injury. He was out for the last 2 or 3 drives. I think very important player for the Raiders. So I would definitely keep an eye on that injury status throughout the week because with a hamstring injury, if it's severe, I don't think he will going to make it this Sunday. I think it would play a big role towards that total because if that week 1 performance from the Raiders defense was or carries any signal going forward, they suddenly have a very good pass rush with Max Crosby being better, with Yannick Ngakoue, and I also like their linemaking corps with KJ White and Denzel Perryman. So they should be much better against the one. We know that the Steelers like to keep Najee Harris on the field for 100% of the snaps. So the Steelers will probably look to establish the one. It might not work against that front 7. And then you have Big Ben being forced to throw the ball against a very decent pass rush against that offensive line. I don't know if they can pass the ball consistently enough. And on the other side, as Drew and Rob have already mentioned, I don't really believe that we're going to get an A+ performance from the Raiders this week because for whatever reason, the Ravens couldn't generate any pass rush with 4 guys on the last 2 drives or on the final drives before overtime. They were suddenly rushing 3 guys. I don't know why. But against the Steelers, there will be a different story. And I think Derek Carr under pressure is always a very bad idea. So in general, I don't really see both teams scoring a lot of points in this one. But 47 is a key number. No play for me right now, and I would definitely keep an eye on the Yannick Ngakoue injury.
Yeah, look, a few opinions about that one. I think this is probably going to be not probably your biggest play or most solid play of the week, but let's take the Steelers -5.5 at 1.95 to wrap up the main slate. We covered 4 games there. We're going to get into any other bets section, best bets section thereafter. But if you want to recap those, check out insights.matchbook.com. Very quick recap off the bat. Chargers -3 at 2.04. The 49ers Eagles over 50 at 1.9. Steelers -5.5 at 1.95. And don't forget, if you want to sign up at matchbook.com today, all those prices are available at those current lines. Use the bonus code NFL20 for that 20 quid free bet. All right, Drew Dinsick, any other bet section? You've given me 3 here. Well, give me your best 2 of those 3.
Best 2.
Best 2.
Well, these are all stinky. So,
I don't mind.
Best 2. I'll take the Vikes +4.5. I think they have the weapons in the passing game that can really put. I guess if we go back to last week, the Titans, they came out and gave you an F. The Cardinals, they came out and gave you an A. Like off the top, I think Suma mentioned or Rob or they both mentioned, we don't really know where teams fell on their distributions week 1. We do know where the Titans and the Cardinals fell. The Cardinals had a perfect game. The Titans had a 0. I think the Cardinals had some issues actually offensively, particularly their offensive line that didn't really manifest just because of the way the Titans can't really generate any semblance of a pass rush. And I would expect that the Vikings with their defense, they will at least be able to do better than the Titans in that department. Obviously, Kyler Murray, very mobile. He can elude you. But I see this as much closer to a pick 'em. I wouldn't make the Vikings, a favorite, but I definitely have them under 3. So I have happily took the plus 4.5 there, and then I'll lay 5.5 with the Pats and Mac Jones against this Jets team. The Jets, I didn't think that was an unfair result that they stayed within. That they were within reach with the Panthers. The Panthers were wildly unimpressive offensively. And I think the Patriots and Mac Jones looked pretty good overall outside of the couple fumbles that they had. And that defense, I mean, they must be absolutely salivating in terms of their ability to generate pressure on Zach Wilson, a guy that had very little time to throw. So I think, you're getting a lot of things and you're getting enough positives here that I don't mind laying a big number with the rookie quarterback on the road in week 2, even though that's probably a lot of players will steer clear of this one because that's kind of the kiss of death. But I'm under 6, so I'll lay 5.5 with the Pats.
Yeah, I'm with you there on that one, even as a Jets fan. There's going to be more to come from Zach Wilson, but it's not going to be next week, I don't think. Rob Pizzola, you opposed Tennessee last week, rightly. You got that so right with the Cardinals +3, but you're with them this week.
I am. I think this is a numbers play in general, and I agree with Drew. I think we kind of got probably the worst case scenario from Tennessee last week. I mean, there is potential that this offense can be average to below average this year. I just don't think it's unlikely. Todd Downing made some huge mistakes play calling last week. I mean, they threw 5 play action passes against Arizona when that was their calling card last year. So I think they're going to get back to their more regular offense. But the most important factor for me in this game is Seattle doesn't have Chandler Jones. Like, that was such a big deal for Tannehill last week. He was just facing endless pressure every time he dropped back in the pocket. And Seattle doesn't boast that same pass rush. So I think the Titans are able to at least keep this a game, match scores with them. And we know something about the Seahawks just in general under Pete Carroll is they let opponents back into the game as well when they have leads. They just kind of sit on it, and that tends to happen. So I think 5.5 is a little bit too much here. I'll take Tennessee.
Suma, anything else jumping up for you? I think you like 1 or 2 team totals this week.
Yeah, I want to go with team totals. Unfortunately, many books don't open them until the weekend. So we are only dealing with a handful of books right now. But this will be an introduction to my best bet, and that's Bills team total over 26.5. Currently listed at -110 at a major sportsbook in front of me.
Don't be plugging other people. Yeah, okay, you're all good.
And I think, unless proven otherwise, I think we should take any team total for the Chiefs under 30. Yeah. I think 4 touchdowns and 1 field goal for this offense for Patrick Mahomes. As long as you see anything under 30, in my opinion, that's very good to go.
Yeah, like the angle. I'll tell you what, Suma, because you made reference there as well, we won't have them till later in the week, so I don't want to lock them in for people on Wednesday or Thursday. I think it's a bit unfair. So let's just take, we'll get to your best bet in a second. Anyway, Pats -5.5. Drew, you like that one at 1.88. The Vikings +4.5, 1.97. And the Titans +5.5 for Rob is available at 1.94 on site. All right, Suma, let's come back to you. You kind of gave, you tipped your hat a small bit there in terms of your best bet. Buffalo, what's the story? They're laying 3.
Yeah, disclaimer, I got a flat -3. I think right now you can get -3, -120, -125, somewhere around that. Mm-hmm. That would still be a play for me. Yep. Because before week 1, that number was -4 for me. It's still -4 because nothing has really changed. Miami had a very fluky game at New England, and I think the Bills are going to face a much different defense this time, a completely different style of defense. Miami doesn't have that stout front 4. They need to come with man coverage and blitzes. The Steelers tried lots of zone. They only rushed 4 for the majority of the game, and it's a completely different matchup. And the Bills already torched the Dolphins last season, and not a lot of defensive personnel has changed for the Dolphins. That makes me believe the Bills will have another stinker this week.
All right, Rob Pizzola, what's your top selection this week, man?
I'm going to play the Jets and the Patriots under 42.5. I don't mind playing under on these low totals this year. If this was last year, this wouldn't even be in consideration for me. But after a week, we saw the holding back up. A lot of this is to do with the fact that I just see the Jets being unable to score points in this game. We saw Belichick do it to another young quarterback last week in Tua, and Tua didn't really play a great game. I know that the Dolphins won, but we've talked about how that was fluky. If Zach Wilson is not scoring on the Carolina Panthers defense, I think this is going to be a big challenge in general against this New England front seven, especially with Mekhi Becton out now as well. So I see this as a game where the Pats probably get out ahead. They slow it down a little bit. They run the ball a little bit. It's not the days of Rex Ryan being the head coach for the Jets where Belichick wants to win by 100 points, right? It's more so like, let's keep this healthy. Let's get this train rolling. And also, the last thing I'll say is I like Mac Jones last week, but I'm still very much concerned with the Patriots' red zone offense. I think that might be an issue for them this year, just like it was last year, where they dial in a lot of running plays, waste a down on first down with runs and stuff like that. So I'm not high on the Patriots' offense in terms of their point scoring ability as well this season. So I'll take the under 42.5.
Drew Dinsick, your best bet. We didn't cover it, so you're going off piece for this one. What's your top play this weekend?
Well, anytime you can get in bed with Carson Wentz under a touchdown, you have to do it, right? So I took the Colts +4, and there's a number of angles here. I don't even really want to go so far off the reservation. But the idea that I guess really the matchup that I love the best here, you have a Rams defense that I had huge questions about coming into the season, and none of those questions were answered positively in that game against the Bears. The fact that they gave up as many yards as they did, particularly on the ground, to that, that scheme and that offensive line was eye-opening, I feel like. And now they go up against a Frank Reich team that in general can and likes to push you in the run game if they can. And I think that is going, I think this is the Jonathan Taylor special on the rundown of the early part of the season here for the Colts. I don't see them really having any trouble generating a lead here, which helps them then kind of play a little bit more effectively defensively. If you look at the Colts' performance last week against the Seahawks, it was a disaster on both sides of the football. There's no denying this. A lot of the offensive problems I felt like were concentrated in the first half, and they were really related to kind of rust with sort of the entire, offensive line hadn't had a lot of time to gel and play together. Carson Wentz hadn't taken many snaps in the preseason, so the fact that they looked rusty in the first half was not surprising. I had Seattle in like every contest I played because I was kind of banking on that. But I was surprised because the Seattle offense took advantage of the Colts defense easily, honestly. In fact, they hit all of the, keys that you would expect to do if you're trying to attack a cover two. And guess who runs that offense? It's Shane Waldron, who previously played for the Rams. Now you may say, well, if the Rams know exactly what to do, aren't they just going to repeat what Seattle does? Well, I thought Indianapolis at halftime, and then what the comments you got after the game suggest, they know exactly what they needed to do to fix that. They addressed it in game, I thought. And if the Rams roll in and expect to do exactly what Seattle did in terms of attacking the cover two, I don't see it being as successful, considering that they just saw it and they now know exactly what they need to do in terms of game-to-game adjustments. So there are a lot of positives here that I think get you from a D performance from the Colts last week closer to a B, maybe even an A here against the Rams. And then on the flip side, the Rams are in a brutal spot. They're coming off of a primetime game on the West Coast where they opened their stadium and they beat the tar out of the Bears. And now they're flying east, playing early. Oh, by the way, a week before they go up against the Buccaneers.
Let down.
Not an ideal spot. If we were a narrative-based program, we would be hammering sandwich spot, guys. Classic sandwich spot here for the LA Rams. Yeah. But in seriousness, no, there are matchup and motivational angles here that I think all favor the Colts. So I'll happily take +4. And actually, I realistically think this team comes away with the upset.
And sometimes, like Rob said, you can look at the narrative. It's just not every game, so sometimes it can be done. All right, that's it. A lot of good stuff there, guys. Thank you for watching today. I see a lot of live comments, and my apologies, I didn't get a chance to get to them. Just one of those things, a bit of time constraints. But if you are watching us now today, even on our YouTube channel, please do give us a thumbs up and click the subscribe button. It does help us get our content out to a wider audience. And again, on the podcast, please leave us preferential review. Or if you want to say some bad things and give us a bit of constructive feedback, that is okay too. My thanks to Drew, my thanks to Rob, my thanks to Suma. A lot of fun again this week. Gentlemen, check out insights.matchbook.com for a full recap of the selections. Until next Wednesday, best of luck with your week 2 bets.